in the industry because obviously, like I said, in textile, you are actually already in a production process. So it's not possible to do it without production partners. So in that sense, that scaling is not so difficult from a technical perspective, or it's not difficult to maintain the integrity of the product. Obviously, what's a challenge is the funding. You have to prepay everything, and that can be quite a big burden financially. So it's more of a cash flow issue, I would say, at that stage.
I think in software, it's a gradual process, right? So once you have a prototype, you can try to build on that as long as it's possible. But at some point, usually this early stage prototype does not have the software architecture needs and the scalability that you're looking for, and you'll have to rebuild it. And that's something where I would really advise you to talk to someone like Holycode, us, for example, or other companies that really know how to do this next step properly, because that's the moment you'll start spending quite some resources. And if you fuck it up, it could break your neck, right? So I think that's try to postpone it as long as you can to grow without having to rebuild it. But at some point you'll have to face it and then do a very informed decision about what are you doing. But the longer you can wait, the more clear you are on what your product is going to look like in the long term. So that's going to make it easier afterwards to build the right version of it.
In food, it's actually not so different. It's like you have your first prototype, it works, the people like it. And then once you start producing in small scales, I would say like 100 kilos per day or maybe 100 kilos per week, all of a sudden you realize the mistakes in the product and things that are not scalable. And so in food, you just need to start producing the product several times in a row. And then you will realize what you need to change in order to have a higher quality prototype that's still very small scale. Those are things like a different supplier that supplies your products, maybe not on your production day, but day before. Maybe the amount of, or like the carrots need to be peeled instead of not peeled, and then it tastes a little bit different. And like all of a sudden, you are absolutely in hardcore manufacturing, but then you get to the next level once you start manufacturing the product.
Yeah, maybe I don't want to be the caveat person, but I think what I would be careful about is assuming that you have a low quality product and you go to a high quality product, right? I mean, your low quality product needs to be sellable. So I think I'm not sure if that's in the lean setup, but I'm pretty sure you all have seen this slide about, having a scooter, having a bike, trying to solve in need and adding to the need of the customer in moving quicker from A to B. So you're right that you're creating at the beginning or whatever scooter, whatever it's going to be, still needs to be good enough, right? So I think I would look at it more as scaling down on what you need to really sell and serve a need, and then expand on functionality, tooling, from, I don't know, shoes to mattresses in the sleep area, whatever it's going to be, rather than thinking that you can start with something shitty and then make it less shitty over time, right? So you can start with something that is embarrassing, but it needs to be good enough. And that's the trade-off, which is always tricky to answer, right? Because it really depends on what you're building, and there's no black or white in that decision. So you always have to judge it yourself in a way.
And adding on this, last week I was at the Blue Line, 2 weeks ago, I was at the Blue Line Incubator doing a product market fit session with them for 3 hours. And it really depends on the segment that you have, right? So if you're working, let's say, with UBS or Credit Suisse, etc., as your first customers, they cannot live with a product that you are really embarrassed about. That's just not the way that they are set up to work, right? So there you have a very different end on quality that is asked of your product, and you might need to invest into it much earlier. Whereas if you're really in the low-end SaaS B2C area where you don't spend a lot on each individual client, you can get away with much more. But as Dennis said, this is really different for each use case, and you'll have to get a feeling and an understanding for what's the value behind each customer and what they need in order to buy in. Yeah, so I think that's quite difficult. Also, the question that we have from Philip, which is going in that direction, like if you have interested customers, what are the relevant factors to close them in the SaaS area? That goes in the same direction, right? Now, he was saying it's SMEs and solopreneurs. So I'm assuming the tickets or the price you're asking of them is not going to be huge, but then it's a different game than if you're asking a very big price, right? One thing that I learned from Manuel from Sales Playbook lately, well, I've heard it before, but I relearned it through him again now, is basically you need to show them the cost of inactivity. So what is it going to cost them if they're not using your product, or if they're not, what are they missing out by not choosing to now use your product? So create a sense of urgency that is actually for them understandable in what it's going to change for them going forward. But it depends really on the customer group.